A few people were left for introduction, AK, there is another one out there, but we will continue because now we don't have time. But please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, because we want this session to be as interactive as possible, and idea is here to give you, to enable you as far as we can with whatever little time we have. And so don't hesitate to ask questions. Okay, that being said, I have to now introduce Mr. Ravindran. Mr. Ravindran, we have known for a while now. Mr. Ravindran is management committee member and in BCIC. He's also the chairman of Startup and Economic Affairs Committee in BCIC. BCIC stands for Bangalore Chamber of Industries and Commerce. And BCIC last year got very active in helping startups. I will leave it to Ravi to briefly tell us about what is it that he is leading in BCIC. Ravi, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ravi. It has always been a great inspiration to listen to you in the IIT forums and whichever other forums that I have seen you. And excellent motivator, great speaker, and great depth of knowledge is how I conceive Mr. Ravi, and bulletproof your story, Mr. Sudeep and Anupama. Thank you for bringing me here. This is the first meeting that I am coming in, and there are so many messages that you have sent me in the past and which used to go in the spam folder. I always saw it as geo-fullest. I thought it was something to do with Reliance, and then I left it away until I opened the mail, and then I saw that it was Ravi Challu, my good friend. I am alumni of IIM Ahmedabad and have about 33 years of experience and 17, 18 years as first generation entrepreneur running various companies in Bangalore and other parts of India. Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce is the apex body of industry, both in the large and medium size, with about 44 years of existence and has about 850 members. The Startup and Economic Affairs Committee is one of the subcommittees of the Chamber, and it caters to mentoring, hand-holding, assisting, financing, funding, incubating, and all of that. That is how it is. And it has recently conceived last year the first maiden award, which is called the BCIC Emerging Stars Award, where Deloitte happened to be the knowledge partner. It is undergoing the final stages of providing the award very soon in the next 3 or 4 months. With that, I think I will leave it at that, and I'm willing to offer any help to Ravi and everybody else involved in this group. We can privately chat later on. Thanks, Ravi, for this opportunity, and it's great going ahead for you, and look forward to listening to you now as to how to boost our own sales. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ravi. Okay, I will jump into the presentation straight away without wasting any more time. Cancel. Okay. So why is sales difficult? I think this becomes especially relevant because most startups are run by tech entrepreneurs who understand probably coding, who understand product management, but for them, or product design or operations, and sales and marketing has always been something that's very distant to them. And it's almost like black art, which they kind of wonder about. What do really salespeople do? Do they add value? And all those kind of questions I've heard in all my career. Today we'll actually dive into it and understand why do we see sales as a difficult activity, and how can we actually get past that difficulty and make this really an easy activity to manage. To begin with, what I would like to do is give you a brief idea about what is the philosophy that Bulletproof Your Startup is based on, and what is the problem that we are attempting to solve. So my own background is I've worked for 40 plus years in IT industry, and for last 7 years I've been working.
It's not visible, sir.
Oh, okay, hang on. I have not started sharing, it looks like. Let me do that. Share screen. Okay, here it is. Share. Sorry about that. I had not started sharing. Can you see it now?
Yes, visible.
Okay, great. So I might pause in between because Sudip has converted me into a host. So in between, I have to keep admitting people into the webinar. So please, I apologize for that and bear with it. Our understanding. So the question we have tried to answer is, why do SME sector? Why can't the SME sector grow at a fast pace? And why is it that 95% of startups close within 3 years? We were in our process of understanding that specific phenomena. What we understood was that we need to look at the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem. And this is what we understood, that sorry, I forgot to mention that. BICE was formally set up in September 2018, specifically to address this high failure rate that has beset startups. The starting up set of premises that we had were that culturally Indian youths are fundamentally encouraged to seek jobs rather than entrepreneurship. And consequently, they are not trained or coached to be one. They would rather do something rather than think and plan and execute. Because thinking, planning, and executing means good understanding of problem solving and ability to think through things. And setting up a business is a fairly complex activity. Therefore, building an entrepreneur mindset who can think about complex issues and then set up a business doesn't come easily to us. We would rather be more realistic than be in touch with our emotions and passions. Consequently, we do not chase our dreams and don't take the risks. To give you an example, think about the time you were in 12th class. You had moved from 11th to 12th. And there is this whole pressure on you to start preparing for entrance examinations so that you can get into a great college. And you're looking at those 2 months of summer holidays and saying, you know what, why don't I figure out setting up something, maybe a samosa stand or a idli stand, and make money and also learn what does it feel like. And you approach your parents, and guess what would have happened? In all likelihood, you would have got scolded and you would have been reminded that you need to focus on getting a good job and building a great career. So why don't you start preparing for entrance examinations? What happened in the process was that you got told entrepreneurship is a bad idea. And in your entire schooling, entire college, none of the education systems actually help think through how to set up businesses and how to solve problems. I spent 5 years in IIT, and when I look back, in those 5 years, not a single professor or not a single course helped me think about what are the business challenges and problems to solve in India. They were busy equipping me with all the technical knowledge so that I could become a great employee somewhere. So then it became necessary for us to look at the Western entrepreneurship ecosystem and see what is different. Why is it that they are successful and we are not as successful? So fundamentally, what we saw was youth are encouraged to be entrepreneurs right from their childhood if they show inclination and initiative. We have countless examples of people who started doing some activity while they were in school and made money. Bill Gross, one of the most famous investors, startup founder, a serial entrepreneur, and who runs a incubator called the Idea Lab, started his entrepreneur journey at the age of 12. He wanted to sell candy at a bus stand. And when he approached his father gave him $100 immediately and said, you know what, you're going to pay 25% of profits to me for this $100. So the father immediately gave two critical lessons to the son. A, great to think of being an entrepreneur and doesn't matter what you start doing. B, money is not free. Even if I'm your father, you will have to pay for the money by sharing profits. The other thing which I've seen is they make liberal use of thought frameworks, business models, business tools, and take coaching. I'm really surprised that in India, entrepreneurs are ready to jump into setting up startups and businesses without zero training. And that surprises me because you would not do that if you wanted to learn swimming. You will not jump into the deep end of the pool and say, you know what, I will figure it out. Or if you wanted to be a tennis ace or a cricket ace, you would not just say, okay, you know what, I'll start playing cricket and become great. Doesn't happen. So you take coaching for swimming, you take coaching for cricket, yet for the most difficult project that you have picked up in your life, you don't take any help. And that is what is fundamentally different and leads to a lot of failures. The other thing we've seen again and again, and high degree of customer centricity and value creation, focus on value creation. This is completely missing in India. We don't think about what value we are creating, and this is something we will keep revisiting today during the presentation. And then they have highly evolved communication skills and marketing ability to market themselves. And what we don't realize is that this is because they are fundamentally in touch with their emotions and their passions. They have learned to express them. They're constantly taught to express themselves. Whereas most engineers that I have worked with are very hesitant to communicate. Their communication skills really need to improve. So what is the problem statement? The problem statement for us is, in order for Indian startup entrepreneur to be successful, he needs to be coached using a combination of thought and business frameworks to help him strategize and then create, execute, review, and refine his operations plan in a structured manner that covers his complete journey, from the time he gets an idea till he has created a growing company. This is what BICE focuses on. This is what we do. I will, during the later part of the presentation, help you understand what exactly we do. In fact, the next few slides will tell you that. So what we have done is, we believe that structured thinking and use of frameworks has to be fundamental to growth of a company. And for a startup entrepreneur to be successful. So we've created what we call 5 Chasms Journey Business Evolution Framework that leverages well-established international as well as proprietary business frameworks to help the entrepreneur convert his ideas into a successful company. This is what the 5 Chasms framework is all about. You see the 6 circles. It starts with converting an idea and figuring out whether an idea is really an opportunity. And once you figure out which of your ideas is really an opportunity, then get into what we call customer development. I'll be going deeper into these things during the presentation, and we'll build a better understanding. The next stage that you need to cross is to grow your products and establish what we call product go-to-market fit, so that you figure out larger segment of customers are accepting your solution. And post that, you have to discover your business model. How will you make money? What systems and processes will you use? Once you've got this in place, now you are ready to actually approach your main market and build your go-to-market strategy. If you do that successfully, you've got a company that is set up for growing. We'll go deeper into this later, but I want to move on. So what are the ways we help startups? And we actually help in 4 different ways, not 3. Workshops. You're attending a workshop right now. Close to 3,000 entrepreneurs have already attended these workshops over the last 3 years. We then do one-on-one coach insight, where we pick up a specific issue that you're facing. We work with you, analyze that issue over a period of 2 to 3 weeks using some of the frameworks that we have designed. The intent here is to help you strategize and figure out the tactics you need to use to get past that issue that you're facing. Strategy design so if you see the 5 Chasms framework, it points out 5 chasms where usually the startups fail, where you need support. So strategy design is a new product that we have introduced, which specifically aims at if you're stuck at one of the chasms, and help you strategize and then create an operations plan to get past that chasm that you are stuck at. And then we do what we call end-to-end deep coaching. We have worked with and are currently working with multiple startups. Totally about 25 startups have been coached so far. Some of them are still undergoing coaching. Quickly, team, myself, Ravi Challu, 42 plus years of experience from IIT Kanpur. I've already told you what I do. Anupma saying 17 plus years of industry experience, 9 plus years of entrepreneurial experience. From IIT Kanpur, successfully exited 2 startups. Sudev Bhattacharya, 18 plus years experience, high technology product development, 8 plus years in 3 startups and exited 2 startups successfully. Apart from this, we have 12 domain experts and facilitators who come in specifically for specific exercise. Okay, now getting into the myth number 1 about sales. We believe, most entrepreneurs believe that customers buy products or service that are cutting edge, use latest technology and have a basket full of features. This is a myth. This is not true. So I want you to really think about what is the single most important factor that helps you close a sale. Single most, just one. Please type your response in the chat and Sudip will help me consolidate the answers. I'm going to wait for about 30 seconds here and let you type in chat. In fact, I'll go get a glass of water in the meanwhile. चाय वाय मिलेगी विचुन कहीं तक सुन सिर्फ चाय बट मोगैम्बो खुश हुआ कि आप लोग कुछ काम कर रहे हो, बना रहे हो, मजे कर रहे हो. गुड. Okay, Sudip, what is the answer we have? What are people saying? What is the single most important?
We have about 11 responses. Interesting. Customer pain point, quality, price, trustworthy team, availability, need, value that the product brings, solves real world problem, quality of product or service, trust by Hasmukh as well, solves real world problem, buying is an emotional decision by Neeraj, need meets solution we offered Pawan, solving customers pain.
Okay, good, excellent, excellent. So let's go beyond and see. Winning customers' trust is the most important factor. It doesn't matter what solution you have, is it cutting edge, are you solving world hunger, doesn't matter. If you can't win customers' trust, you may be really addressing the key pain point. You may have the greatest product. He will not buy your product. The best example I can give you is initially when Reliance Communication came out with mobile phone service, they had challenges establishing trust. Nobody was ready to trust them. Even Reliance Jio faced major issues in gaining customers' trust, even though Reliance Jio had a fantastic offer in place. So trust is the most important factor. The question you have to constantly answer for yourself is, how will I get the customer to trust me? Rather, trust me and my whatever advice or solution I'm offering. That is the most fundamental question you have to ask. And this does not need any special skill. You don't have to be a sales ace or a marketing ace to find answers to this question. All you have to sit down and think. Okay, moving on. So how will you establish trust? Some of the answers that you guys have given are actually not about the key factor, but it's about how will you establish trust. So you will establish trust by understanding the, give me a minute, I'm trying to hide this bar, hide video panel. Okay. So understand the pain he's encountering in a job he's attempting to perform. Suggest a way to address that pain and being honest with him about the positives and the negatives. You can't just say, you know what, I have the answer for you. You will have to take him through what are the positives and what are the negatives. So it's like you going to a doctor, right? You tell doctor, you know, doctor, I got a problem with my stomach. So he takes out a tablet and says, go have this. You're not going to trust the doctor. Why? Because he didn't spend any time trying to understand your real issue. What is really bothering you? And then he has not sat down and discussed pros and cons of different medicines and arrive at a conclusion with you which will be best for you. Which doctor will you trust? The first or the second? Clearly the second. So this is the second lesson you have to take. It is about how you address the issue the customer is bringing to you. So for example, if you know that your product or solution has a longer implementation time, and you tell him, hey, listen, it has a longer implementation time, but you know what? I'm going to put a team in place to make sure that your team doesn't have a pain point, and I take that pain. So the customer gets a sense that you are stepping into his shoes and understanding what will not work for him. So this is how you establish trust, being empathetic and sensitive to customers' issues. Moving on. Then ensure that the pain is actually removed by your solution as committed. Because if it is not as committed, he's going to lose faith and trust in you. Fundamental thing, and there is no science to this. I'm not telling you something that is some magical formula. These are fundamentals of establishing a great relationship with the customer. And almost all entrepreneurs miss out on this. Remember, I told you about, fundamentally, I find culturally we are very weak on customer centricity and value delivery. This is all coming from there. If you're not customer centric, you will fail to build trust. Okay, so now let's assume you have established faith, you have established trust. Is the sales closed? I need you guys to answer on chat on this. Are we done? Sales is done, or are we missing something? So Deep, help me here. I'm going to wait for 30 seconds and wait for what people are typing on chat.
Devendra says no. Abhijit says no. Nagraj says price. Amit says not done till we get the purchase order. Pawan have the purchase order. So 2 for purchase order, 2 no, and 1 says price.
Okay, great. So the question is,
action.
Has he agreed to pay the price you want to charge, right? This is what is coming up. Because if he has not, he's not going to give you a purchase order. But is it really about price? Or is it about establishing value? Have you established value in his mind? I want to share a video with you guys here. Give me a moment. I'll try and start that video. I will have to see how to switch my screen. Stop share. and start share again. Go to, okay, give me a moment. I have to come to, actually it's not this, it's the other one. Close tab, browser. Okay, guys, I've got the YouTube's screen on. Can you see that? Sudip?
Yeah, the screen is visible.
Okay, I need to start.
Audio.
I need to make sure that the audio works.
Use computer audio, that option.
We'll have a chat about it in a moment. There's no such thing as a product that's too expensive. No such thing as a product that's too expensive. A customer tells you a product is too
Share computer sound is on.
The sound started coming, but then it stopped.
Oh, because I stopped the video. So let me know if you can hear the sound.
It's too expensive?
Yes,
you're talking to the wrong customer.
Okay.
You think anyone walks into Lamborghini and says, but a Toyota is less? Lamborghini will tell you, then go to Toyota. Why are you here? True fact, I'm the most premium price speaker in South Africa. I charge in South Africa more than any other speaker in the market. My office will also tell you price is not a negotiation I have with my clients. I never talk price, I talk value. Anytime you find yourself talking price, know that now you are not an entrepreneur anymore. Never talk price with customers, talk value. No, don't talk price, talk value. And the difference between the difference between the two is perception. So I'm gonna come back to this in a minute. I need an example. What do you do, ma'am?
I'm a makeup artist.
You're a makeup artist. This is fantastic. What's your name?
Cindy Siwek.
Cindy Siwek. Love your hair. Do you think that would work on me? It wouldn't work. Your hair color on me?
It would.
It would,
In
no?
red.
In what? Who's telling me in red? So what I was saying. So Cindy Siwek, how much do you charge per hour?
I charge per face, so I'll say.
I have never in my life charged per face. That's really cool. How much per face?
800 rand per face.
Oh! I love people like you. You are so cool. Can we case study you for a bit? Is that okay?
Yes.
Right. So Cindy Siwek charges 800 rand per face. And it takes you 45 minutes to an hour. At the end of which we have a face. Right. Now, Cindy Siwek, how many customers have come to you and said, can you lower the price?
Quite a few.
Quite a few. What do you do then? You lower the price, right?
No.
What do you do?
I say no, I can't.
Why?
I can go to someone else. Because that's my time, that's my skill, and that's my product.
Never say no.
Why?
Because then you walk away from a sale. The fact that I came to you means I'm interested in buying. So what you got to figure out, this is a great sales technique. What you got to figure out is how to make the customer feel bad for not buying. The minute you say no, they don't feel bad because then they're like, she's arrogant, and they walk away. Never say no. No is a word you should try never to use in a sales process. You got to find a way of saying no without saying no. And then you got to find a way of saying, I'm not the problem, Mr. Customer, you are. Okay? So let's try this. Can we model this? So I'm coming to you. Hi, Cindy Siwek. Can you do my face, please? Yes?
Yeah.
Right. I have a budget of like 420.
Okay. I charge you 800.
Sorry, what?
I charge 800.
No, I wasn't asking how much you charge. I said my budget is 420.
Okay, I can refer you to someone else on my WhatsApp.
Oh, you can refer me? Okay, cool. Give me their number. Take the number, walk away. Whatever you just said to me? No. Can I play you? Try it. Gunja. Good.
So I have a budget of 420.
Of what?
420.
420 is your budget? Where are you going?
To a wedding.
You're going to a wedding?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Is there going to be like friends there?
Yeah.
Are you married? No. You have an ex? Watch where this is going. Just watch. All right, so your ex might be at the wedding. What's it worth to you to make sure that your ex sees you looking the best you've ever looked? Is it? I mean, look, you want to pay me $420, I charge $800. The difference between the two is $380. What I'm trying to work out is if making your ex feel bad is worth $380 or not. Because if it is, then I'm the person you come to. But if looking any kind of way, whether you see your ex or not, is not important, then I'm happy to find you somebody who can do it for $420. What did I just do? I changed the conversation from price to value. Now in her mind, the anchor is not price. The anchor is this bloody ex. That's it. Yeah? All the time. Shift the anchor all the time. Yeah?
Yeah.
The price is the conversation people have absent of.
Okay. Sudip, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Let's go back to the presentation. So what did we learn? If you keep talking price, customer will push you lower and lower. Price is a very bad conversation.
The screen hasn't yet changed.
Okay, that's because I haven't shared it. Give me a minute. Okay. Can you see the presentation? Establishing value.
Yes.
Okay, great. So price is a bad conversation. Don't have a price conversation, have a value conversation. But for that, you have to be very, very clear what is the real value that the customer is getting. Can you put a number? Can you get the customer to put a number to it? What is that number in customer's mind that he'll be willing to pay for that value? That is how price gets established. It doesn't matter if it took you just $10 to make the product. If he's willing to pay 10,000 bucks, you charge 10,000 bucks. You don't do markup. Okay, I'm making 10 bucks and it cost me 10 bucks and I want 50% profit, therefore 15 rupees. It doesn't serve any purpose, that conversation. If he's willing to pay 10,000, charge 10,000. If he's not willing to pay a penny more than 5 rupees, you're stuck. Value is not established. Fundamentals of sales. Establish customer trust, understand what he is dealing with, make a commitment in solving that for him, and establish value in the process. What is it worth to him? This is your starting point. So let's go to the next myth. Myth number 2, sales is a mysterious art that engineers do not and cannot understand. Can't be a bigger myth. The fact is, sales is science. So let's start looking at, what is sales? Are sales and marketing really different? Usually engineers confuse the two. Most entrepreneurs confuse it. They think it's all the same. So let's examine it. Sales is equal to marketing, myth. Sales is equal to price, myth. Sales is equal to value you create. So let's understand the sales and marketing black box. What are you trying to do? Get new leads, get orders, solve customer issues, build and nurture relationships, understand the market and competition trends, follow up on order delivery, stock management, follow up collections, take reorder from existing customers. This is all you do, right? And this all gets clubbed under sales for most entrepreneurs. And most entrepreneurs will actually hire Amitabh Bachchan, want to hire an Amitabh Bachchan who can go close sales in one order. Then they also want him to take reorders, get new leads, figure out whether the order got delivered in time. They also want him to build relationships. Your demand from him is fairly large because you're paying him big bucks. So what do you really have to do? Generating demand, that is finding potential customers, fulfilling demand, creating new and mining customers. Right? Fundamentally, this is what you have to do. If you can do this successfully, you're done. Generating demand is marketing. It is not sales. So please don't ask your salespeople to go generate demand. That is not his job. Fulfilling demand is his job. That is sales. So let's pick up that part and see what needs to be done. So here's the whole flow. You do inquiry generation, which is marketing and BD activity. Then you do inquiry management. So inquiry comes in, you have people following up, you try to get an order out of that inquiry, and then you convert that inquiry into an order. Now you have to fulfill the order. Please bear with me. This is a general model because it will be different for people who are selling apps, different for people who are selling a physical product, difficult for people who are different for people who are actually in the services business. But let's understand the basic underlying principle. Then after sales service, because customer might have issues and you need to handle it. And then also finally collect payments. So for example, if there is a free trial model, sales hasn't happened. You have to now convert that free trial model into a paid customer. And then once he's become a customer, you have to start remarketing and cross-selling and upselling other products to him, get orders to be repeated, get new orders like this. And then goes back to order fulfillment, after sales service collection, etc., etc. So the box that you see on your left is marketing. Don't ask your salesperson to do this. He will leave. What you see on right is sales. And there also you need to break it up. The only activity that a salesperson should be doing is inquiry conversion. You can hire a champion salesperson here, or you can train people to become champion, and I'll show you how you can train people to become champions. But everything else that you see here can be done by what we call sales operations or sales admin people. These could be employees who you have trained for a specific function and who don't cost you as much as a salesperson. So you need to break it up. You need to break it up and make sure that you are following this organization structure when you're trying to set up sales. And some of you who are just starting may wonder how to do this. We'll come to that also. How do you do this? So point is, the circle that you see that I made on right, it could be a person who you're paying 10, 15,000 bucks. He or she could do all the three activities for you. Marketing, who does this? Initially, guys, the entrepreneur has to do this, and this can be understood. We do a workshop on marketing. If you don't understand this, attend that and you'll get clarity how you can do it yourself. This again can be automated. You can use technology to do this. You can use technology to do this. You can use technology to do almost 90% of what you see here. Yet most startups don't even use the rudimentary CRM system that can actually really professionalize their sales activity. And those of you who would be interested, get in touch with Sudeep. We'll help you figure out which is the right CRM for you. Okay, fine. Now you've done all this, but how do you then manage the actual sales process? What do you do? So there you have to get into the idea of funnel, marketing and sales funnel. And what is this funnel? Funnel is basically at one end you are generating leads and putting that into your pipeline, and then stage by stage helping them reach the next stage in your process. Please remember the word I'm using, process. No entrepreneur sees it as a process. They see it as an activity performed by a champion salesperson, which is why your sales never takes off. So your first stage is creating awareness. B2C, customer is searching for information, B2B is searching for information. You have to figure out in your market segment, the customer profile that you are talking of, how do you make him aware? Give me a minute. Okay, how do you make him aware? And so this is the marketing piece. I'm not going to deep dive here. This we take up in our marketing webinar, but I really want to get into the sales part of it. So how do you generate interest? How will you ensure that everyone in your organization understands how to establish interest? Everyone. So that whosoever picks up the incoming call, he can talk to the customer, talk to the prospect. So if you're a B2B, figure out how will you help the buyer examine specific products. Are you listed in reviews? Are you reviewed anywhere? Has media covered you? That becomes a point of focus for you. Most entrepreneurs don't focus on this. They don't try to get their products reviewed by influencers or by websites who do product reviews. B2C, you have to figure out how to help them learn about your product. This is a very carefully staged process. You follow stage after stage after stage. What you're doing is right from the time you generated a lead till the time you get an order, it breaks into multiple stages. And at each stage, you can write down scripts, process, who's going to do what, how do you deal with objections, what happens if a certain uncertain situation happens. You can start, it is all about data. It is no longer about some black art or black magic, which some specialist salesperson uses. If you track what was customer objection, why did he not go beyond this stage, you can then think about how to address that issue. So scripting and data tracking becomes very, very critical. So break your sales process into stages: awareness, interest, consideration. How will you ensure that everyone in your organization is helping the prospect consider your product? You can even leverage technology for this. Your CRM system can help you do this, both helping the customer learn about product as well as the consideration stage. Now, how do you establish intent? Is the customer ready to buy your product? Is he really interested? Has he put it in his cart? Is he wanting a product demo? He's expressing intent. Again, you can script this, and you can track data about what is the rate of conversion you got, what were the objections, how did we handle objections, which objections couldn't we handle, and what will we do next time. All this can actually become your training manual for sales. But it's a constant observation of the each stage in this entire pipeline, in this entire process. And customers move from one stage to another. Never forget that. Okay, he's seen the demo now. How do you get him to evaluate your proposal? Now remember, the video that we saw on don't establish features and price conversation, establish value conversation. What is the value for customer to get this? Because unless you establish a value which in his mind, which is above your price expectation, And then he is pleasantly surprised to find that, oh no, in his mind, he had thought it's going to cost him $1,000, but it's actually only going to cost $800. He's happy, he decides. So establishing value becomes critical for conversion. Finally, he purchases because you did all the right things at different stages. So I want to break this myth for you. Sales is not black art. It's not black magic. It is science. It is driven by data. It is driven by process. And average people can do good sales. Sure, champions will do excellent sales. But you're not trying to solve world hunger. You're trying to get enough sales into your pipeline so that you can run the companies with a decent amount of operational profit happening for you, so that you can sustain the organization. Myth number 3, and I've heard a lot of startups say this, but all this is applicable for a regular business. Startups face a different situation. So that now we are going to switch the context and start getting deeper into frameworks. So I think we'll pause here and take any questions that the audience might have.
Sure. Whatever questions you have, we can you can type it on the chat, and then we can take it one after another. Any questions, any brainstorming required, any thoughts, any comments? That's a good class to have, Ravi sir.
Very quiet class.
Very quiet class.
Nobody disagrees. Can't get better. Okay. So let's continue then. Sure. So the conversation is going to change now. I'm going to start diving into frameworks and start examining.
Are you audible? I hope everybody is able to hear.
Okay, funnel. Somebody wants the funnel repeated.
Can any of you say yes that you audible? It is.
In B2B, internet sales team is important, or need to have field sales team, internal sales team, or can it be done remotely? Interesting. What if you don't have a product? How to sell a concept? I love this question. I really love this question. So let's go back to that value video we saw. What is the product that she was selling? So a face makeover, is it a product or a concept? I need you to think about it. So I don't think it's about a product or a concept. It's really about what is the customer trying to do. So in absence of the customer context, it is hypothetical. So unless you know what is the customer trying to do, and in doing that, what is the problem that he's facing that needs to be resolved for him? It's only when you have a customer context, you can anchor your concept to some real life problem. Because without anchoring it to a real life problem, you will not be able to figure out what is the value being delivered in that specific situation. So if you can figure that out, that okay, this is the problem the customer is having, and I have an example to give you, but let me complete this. This is the problem the customer is having, and and that problem can be solved in this particular manner. This problem he's encountering when he tries to do this specific activity, and I believe that this can be solved in this manner. Now I'm forming a hypothesis which will benefit him. It'll make it easier, it'll reduce pain, whatever. And for him, the value is X. So, concept is a basis for creating a product or a service, Skand. But concept is a starting thought. You have a certain concept and you want to now explore how to implement that concept, but it has to be rooted in reality. It has to be linked back to some customer problem, some job that customer is trying to do in which he's finding a problem. Otherwise, it's pointless. Okay, so quick example, iPod. So iPod is fundamentally an MP3 player. MP3 players already existed when iPod came out. And but iPod, the basic premise that Steve Jobs had was very different. His premise was, why should I pay for $9.99 to buy a bunch of songs when I really want one song? That's a problem definition. He defined a problem. Now he said, created a concept. What if I could actually provide, and he also, another part of the problem was, it's impossible getting single songs legally today. So he had two problems to solve. How does he get song at a time? And how does he get it legally? Because all that could happen then was download songs from illegal sites using torrent or whatever method you had, and not being sure about whether those downloads were virus free or whether you would have a legal problem tomorrow. So this was the problem definition. Then he came up with a concept. What if I could sell song at a time legally? This is a concept. So then he started figuring out, okay, how do I do that? So I know there's an MP3 player, that technology is proven, it works. Apple never works with cutting edge technologies. It's always a few years behind cutting edge technologies. They only work with technologies that they know are rock solid, have been tested. And then he figured out that, okay, unless I get recording labels to agree to give me a song at a time, this is not happening. So he started that conversation with recording labels, kept at it for, I think, year and a half, till 2 or 3 recording labels agreed to give him song at a time. Okay, now he had an agreement from a party. Then he started figuring out, okay, what do I now do to actually make it available? So iTunes came up and he figured out, how do you download software legally, songs legally? So really secret of success is not iPod itself. Secret of success is getting recording companies to agree and creating iTunes. Now here's a concept that's now become a product. So this is the journey. You can't conceive a product in isolation. Okay, quickly, B2B internal sales team is important or need to have field sales team. Abhijit, it has to be seen very specifically to your situation. So for example, if the B2B product is a solutioning product, let's create constraints around this problem. So you have a B2B problem that needs field sales teams. Let's make that assumption, right? How would you sell during the lockdown? So would you stop selling? Would you say, sorry, my team has to go actually meet the customer face to face? And what would the customer say? You know what? Let the problems continue, since there is no person sitting across the table. I'm not going to buy. The reason I'm making this point to you is that your constraints will define your solution. If you have a financial constraint in hiring a field sales team, you will have to find a way of selling remotely. And go back to the funnel. When do you really need a person to meet the customer? At the last 2 stages of the funnel. Everything else can be handled by tech remotely. So Abhijit, we will really have to get deeper into your specific business and examine whether there is a constraint that forces us to constantly be there. So for example, if you are a service provider for an oil rig, your team will have to be physically present on the oil rig. So it really depends on what are you doing. Okay, we've answered the product concept. Why big companies like Jio starting with less price entering? Interesting point. Okay, let's see why Jio became successful. Jio became successful not because they lowered price. That actually opened a new market for them. Jio became successful because they created value around having data available at a very low cost. They realized that data is the future, and the costs of data were preventing spread of mobile phones and smartphones in India. And they figured that, using a technology which is completely, where they take voice also digitally, and they completely get rid of the voice part of telecom, then they could come out with a technology where they could really lower the costs of voice as well as data. This was the starting concept. What was the problem they were trying to solve? The problem they were trying to solve was, hey, data consumption in India will need to grow, and current mobile technologies don't allow that. So they solved that problem of coming out with a totally new technology. That was the fundamental thing, disrupted by using totally new technology. Then the second disruption they did was they figured out pricing strategy where they could do bundles, which opened up new markets for them. With Jio, what happened was rural markets and semi-urban market, tier 2, tier 3 towns, data consumption shot through the roof, mobile usage shot through the roof. And they also understood that this market is very, very price sensitive. So they made sure that feature phones with 4G capability became available for this market. They were selling phones at $1,500. That completely changed the market. They opened up a totally new market segment. I remember when Jio was launched, most of my friends were very reluctant to switch to Jio. Jio had a fabulous value offer for $499. For example, I switched to Jio immediately. Why did I switch to Jio immediately? Because my phone bills could range from anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000, depending on who I called, how many times I called, how long I called, whether I was roaming, not roaming. It became very complex for me. And there was a lot of pain in deciding which kind of plan should I take from my mobile company. But Jio came out with an offer saying $499 for 1 month. You don't worry. You can call as many times as you want. You can consume as much data as you want. $499 is the price. And for me, it was fantastic because it took away the entire pain of figuring out which plan to use, how many times to call, when do I switch to messaging or WhatsApp, and when do I actually call. I didn't have to do all that. So pricing is part of your business strategy. Pricing is not your business strategy. Okay, moving on. Concept itself. Amit says how to scale up marketing in digital era. Amit, you'll have to join the marketing workshop for that. I don't want to take away time for that from this workshop. Okay, Madan, we'll go back to the funnel slide again so that you guys can have another look-see. Okay, can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this awareness part is the marketing part. I'm not going to spend time on this, but really what you're saying is, how will you make your potential buyer aware about your company, problem you're addressing, how are you addressing it, and value your product delivers. There is a last slide where I want to actually show you how actually advertising establishes value and connects with customer. The challenge with most entrepreneurs is that they want to tell the whole story at this time. They will list all their features, say how great their product is and stuff like that. Your customer is not interested in listening to that. He wants to be aware about your company, what he does. He wants to address what is the problem you're addressing and how are you addressing it. And you need to be clear about what value is your product or service or offering delivering. This is what marketing is really based upon. Okay, once you get an incoming lead, now you have to create interest, because just because a person responded, he's curious, he's not interested. How will you ensure in your organization everybody understands how to establish interest? You can use technology here, or you can train people to handle this part. But remember, if you can use technology, you will have to have a process and you will have to have scripts, right? The same process and script works for people also. So please focus on building your sales process. Don't think of it transactionally. Don't think of it, I will put Amitabh Bachchan there and he'll get me sales. Not happening. From interest, he will move to consideration. Your customer will move to consideration. That is, okay, he got interested. Now he's considering your product. He wants to research. He wants to see reviews. He wants to see what are other people saying about it. So he reads reviews, compares products. Buyers can share research on products and brands with other stakeholders. So you can create referrals. So there is work to be done, and this is data-driven work. This is process, this is steps, this is scripting. This is not rocket science. This is not black art. This is not magic. While he's considering it, he realizes, he reads up reviews and he says, yes, you know what, I'm interested in this product. I want to now actually see the product or start the buying process. So intent is establishing. How will you ensure that everyone in your organization or the process that you have designed and the tech that you're using is helping the prospect establish his intent? So there are so many times you put something in a cart, you look at something, then you have second thoughts and you don't buy it. You have to have a script and a plan even for that stage. Finally, if he moves to this, then now you have to get him to review. If it's B2C, review the cart and check out. Or if he's a B2B, look at your proposal or get your contract proposal and decide on that basis. So how will you ensure that everyone in your organization is helping the prospect put your offering at the top of his list so that he can take a decision? Again, whether it is tech or whether it's a person, this is something that is again script and process driven. And you need data to see what worked, what did not work. And finally, if you succeed in that evaluation phase, he purchases. Your sales transaction is complete. Okay, so we will move beyond funnel. I hope, Madan, this has answered, given you more clarity over what funnel is. We have another workshop which we do where we go into details of funnels. How do you optimize funnels? How do you track? Keep an eye open and keep looking at our announcements, and you can join that one to get a better understanding. Right now, today my focus is, I want you to take away that sales is not a black art. It's not a black magic. If you are structured, if you follow frameworks, if you follow process, you will succeed. Okay, moving on. Myth number 3. This is applicable for regular business. Startups face a different situation. So let's now start deep diving into our understanding of startups. How do we really use frameworks to demystify this whole black magic, black art startup world that all of us are so kind of confused about and really don't have clarity as to how do we really succeed with a startup. So let's start by understanding what is a startup? Which company can I call a startup? So how do I define a startup? Let's look at that. So here is what Government of India says. Should be 5 years in existence and turnover not exceeding 25 crores in last 5 financial years. Man, if you are doing 25 crores in last 5 financial years, you're already a growing business. You're not a startup. But here's the key. Innovating, developing, deploying, and commercializing new product, process, or service driven by technology or intellectual property. So the key is you're innovating, you're developing, you're deploying, and you're commercializing. So innovating is your idea to opportunity stage, developing is your product to market fit stage, deploying is when you scale, get to business model stage, and commercializing is go to market and driving growth. It can be a product, it can be a process, it can be a service. It can be driven by technology like Jio or intellectual property like Amazon. A lot of their intellectual property is in process. Okay, but you know what? What this doesn't really tell me, this definition is not linked to the customer at all. It tells me, like typically for Indian culture, it tells me what I have to do. It doesn't tell me what do I have to think about. Before I go to that part, how do you really define a startup? This is how we at BICE have defined a startup. The next slide will bring that out for you. But I also want to add another aspect here. It could be a regular product, regular business, but you could be opening a new geography or a new customer segment. You're still a startup. Why? Because customer has changed. The way he sees the solution will change. What he considers value will change. What are the buttons you have to press to make him respond will change. And best example for this is Flipkart. Now, why is it the best example? Because Flipkart started by selling books, just like Amazon. So it had already been done by Amazon. But what changed? The market changed, the geography changed, the customer segment changed. So it was still a startup because their experience would be new. They would have to learn from this new market to figure out how does this market respond. Okay, so what is BICE's understanding of a startup? First thing is, please get away from this name called startup. It's a business. Don't ever forget that it's a business, and business has only one purpose. Business has a purpose to create and maintain customers and do it profitably, customer by customer. That is the only purpose of a business. Because the moment you start looking at whatever you're doing as startup, you walk away from that responsibility of being a business. But it's a business with an uncertain future. Why uncertain future? For addressing problems a customer is facing. In a job he's attempting to perform or wants to perform, in a manner no one has addressed earlier. This is where the uncertainty comes from. Because you are trying to solve it in a manner nobody has solved it earlier. So before Uber came in, you could still hail a cab. You could call a number, they were called radio cabs. And a cab would turn up, but it would turn up in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on where the cab was, where is your location, stuff like that. Uber addressed that same booking problem very differently. So if you're addressing it in a manner no one has addressed earlier, you'll have to form a set of hypotheses about because it's not been tried before. So it's a set of hypotheses about how to address them. Because if you're not clear that you are actually creating your solution based on set of hypotheses, you will never set out to test those hypotheses, which is extremely important at idea to opportunity stage. So uncertain because you're trying to solve a problem customer is facing in a job he's trying to do in a manner no one has done earlier. And you have a set of hypotheses about how to address that problem. Therefore, those hypotheses must be tested. And if you address the problems successfully, that your hypothesis is actually proving out, you do POCs, you do MVPs, you get a small set of customers, and you see, yes, you're solving problems successfully. Now you have to discover a business model that, yes, I have solved this problem, but now I must see what systems and processes will I need to build a business on top of this? And what is my revenue model? How am I going to make money? What is the value customer is going to perceive for which he's going to pay me X money? This becomes the next critical part because without this, you can't become a business. And if you do succeed in finding a business model, it should have the possibility of generating humongous future profits. Because without generating humongous future profits, you are a regular business. You're not going to get VC funding. Because VC funding, basic assumption is that you can generate humongous profits. So when you look at your idea to opportunity and you analyze and you say, yes, I can set up a profitable business and I have proven my hypothesis, but guess what? It's not a very large problem that I'm solving. And I will not generate humongous future profits. Forget VC funding. Conventional funding can happen. This for us is the true definition of a startup. Why is it important? Because you will need to keep this in your mind when you set out to sell. Because initially you are just proving a bunch of hypotheses. And you have to be clear, how are you going to prove those hypotheses? So let's move on. My advice to you is take a printout, take a screenshot, print it out, and stick it in the most visible place where during your day you keep seeing it at least every half an hour. So now let's look at, okay, we understand that this is what a startup is. What is my journey going to be like? What will I experience from start to finish? And how do I then make sure that sales can happen as I'm planning during this journey? So here's the most interesting thing. There is this research done by Dr. Rogers in 1960s. American government wanted to figure out how will the farmers adopt the new potato seed because they were trying to improve the potato production, potato being a very, very key part of the entire food chain. And what Dr. Rogers found was this Gaussian curve where initially innovators buy it. And they buy it for novelty. They like the idea of using new seeds, experimenting with new seed. So it's the experience that they're looking for. So that market is about 2.5% according to this curve. Then it's followed by what they call early adopters. Early adopters are people who are looking for competitive advantage. And that market is about 13.5% of your total market. And then you face a major chasm because finding the real market, which is the early conservators, which is 34% of your market, they're looking for benefits, but they're also looking for dependability, reliability, referenceability. You must be a company with really solid foundations for early conservators to buy from you, which is 34% of your market. And then you have late conservators, which is another 34% of your market. And they look for ease of use. They look for simplicity. And finally, you have laggards or skeptics who will finally follow when everybody else has bought. This is how the market, how your customers' behavior breaks up. So first thing you have to remember is that the initial set of customers who you will find when you're trying to prove your product are going to be innovators. And they're going to look for experience. So your sales pitch, your sales strategy has to be aimed at them. Usually what happens is because you haven't looked at it from this perspective, you actually aim it at the main market, which is your early conservators, but they're not going to buy. They're not going to respond. Why? Because they want to see a company dealing with them and not a startup. And they will primarily look for benefits, while as you might be pushing novelty or you might be pushing competitive advantage. Well, let's take an example here. Let us say you're planning to, you are a chemist or a chemical engineer and you've created a new material. Let's say you're a nanotechnologist and you've created a new material which will be used for the shoe soles. And this sole has three properties. It gives you an absolutely great sense of comfort. And it actually cuts down your speed. It actually improves your speed by 2 to 5%. If you're going for running, it'll improve your speed by 2 to 5% with the same amount of effort. And it also absorbs sweat very well. So I've given you three different advantages of your product. First is experience, second is competitive advantage, third is benefit. Great sense of comfort, experience. New material is giving you great sense of comfort. Cutting down your time to run by 3 to 5%, competitive advantage. You can run faster in competition. Sweat absorbent, benefit. Now, if you start your pitch with sweat absorbing quality of your product, it's not going to start selling. Not at the rate you are expecting, because you are a new kid in the block, right? And remember what we said, the customer, you have to build trust with the customer. You're a new kid. How does he build trust? So guys who will take more risk are innovators. And once you have some kind of traction with innovators, then early adopters will start looking at your product, because they also take risk, but not as much as innovators. But early conservators don't take risks. They don't like to take risks. They want references. They want to make sure that, yes, your company will survive, and they want to make sure that, yeah, this product is being used by multiple people, and then they will see value in your benefit. Because for them, value is not just the sweat absorbent capability. Value also is whether you will be there as a company to give service later. And interestingly, this curve applies across industry segments, across business types, across distribution types. It doesn't make a difference. It works. This is the fundamental framework on which we have based the entire BICE philosophy and execution. This is how your sales are going to grow. Slowly initially, so don't panic, plan for it. There's an excellent book, and I'm going to show you a few more, how this has been adopted by different companies and different thought leaders. There's a great book written by Jeffrey Moore, who's an American organization theorist and a management consultant, Crossing the Chasm. Please pick it up. It's a Bible. Anybody who wants to actually understand how to market and sell must read this book, especially for high-tech products. The chasm that you will face from early adopters to early conservators is huge for startups, because this jump is not easy. And you will need special frameworks to actually understand how to cross this. So this is your early market, and your sales strategy for early market has to be very different. Entrepreneurs should get into sales themselves so that they start understanding the nature of the market they are facing. And if you follow it as a process, that what is the customer looking for? How do you establish trust? How do you generate value? How do you use funnel to actually simplify your sales process and be able to track it? Then preferably leverage a CRM technology to help you at that stage. It doesn't cost you much. And some of the good technologies are really free to support you in the initial stages. But the entrepreneur really needs to pick up his briefcase and be there himself. And this is your mainstream market. Steve Blank, who's been a very successful serial entrepreneur and is also a professor, teaches entrepreneurship in Stanford University. He has authored the lean startup model. A lot of startup entrepreneurs like to use the lean model. And here is what he has to say. Initially, you find technology enthusiasts who pick up your product. So novelty experience becomes critical. The bells and whistles become critical. Followed by visionaries who see clear competitive advantage in your product. The best example for this is P&G adopting Salesforce as their platform for managing sales teams way back in 90s. And after that customer, Salesforce didn't look back, because P&G helped Salesforce mature their product. P&G got a product that they wanted. Salesforce got credibility that they wanted. So this is a very critical stage, the early adopter stage. And this is what we call customer development. I showed you initially in that 5 chasm framework that your first stage is customer development. Entrepreneurs need to do this themselves. And this is more word of mouth, going and physically meeting people, In case of lockdown, picking up phone and talking to people. And finally, the mainstream market. So this is how your journey is. Initially, ideation, prototyping, technology creation. Before you actually try to do customer development, don't try to find funding or start selling at this stage, because you're still not sure whether your idea is really an opportunity. Once you figure that out, only then should you move to the other two stages. And be driven by the market. Remain market focused. And your product development and business development should be actually tactical. Keep learning day on day basis and see what the market is telling you before you freeze your product roadmap and move to the main market. This is where you really grow and scale. Your entire sales strategy must be aligned with this framework. You should not try to do sales effort to the mainstream market when you should really be doing customer development for technology enthusiasts and visionaries. Very quickly, I'm actually going to skip this because I've spent a lot of time on this. So we've shown you this framework. There are 5 critical stages for you, 6 actually. The first stage is converting an idea into an opportunity. And there are frameworks available which can help you do that. Then customer development. This is where also startups phase. After you've done that, you're actually at this stage, you're working with more enthusiasts and maybe few visionaries. But here you're largely working with visionaries and some conservative buyers. This is completely conservative buyers. After that, this is your mainstream market. So your selling methodologies, selling efforts are going to change depending on where you are in your journey. And you will have different strategies. You have what we call go-to-market strategy 1 at this stage, because your customers' pain points and what he's trying to do are different. Then you have what we call GTM 2 and finally GTM 3. GTM 3 is your go-to-market strategy for the mainstream market. You cannot have one single go-to-market strategy from day one. Your first 100 customers are going to come from here. So this is very differently followed. Okay, now what I want to do is spend some time is how do you look at your own business and find out what should be your competitive strategy. And this is, remember in the funnel we said there is after interest, there is consideration, right? And then it follows to next step, finally it happens, purchase happens. This understanding, deep understanding of what is your business all about is extremely important for the last 3 stages of your funnel. The critical questions to answer: what will you be innovating? Are you innovating a product or a service? What is your prevailing business model? Are you innovating the business model or business process or revenue model? What are you innovating? Redbus, for that matter, actually innovated business process. They changed how you book bus tickets. What will it be driven by? New technology or intellectual property? So if you notice, this is nothing but a redefinition of the startup definition you saw in the government definition. But you will have to go and answer these questions for yourself. And if you find out that you're not innovating anything, it's not driven by new technology, it's not in a new market segment or geography, it's a regular business. Nothing wrong with that. Go do regular business. But whatever you do, these 5 things, frameworks you must use: business strategy framework, funding strategy framework, go-to-market strategy framework, revenue model, and business model. These are all available on the net. If you go to our website, we have published these frameworks there. You can simply look up on our website and see what these frameworks are. Then the next thing you have to figure out is how differentiated is your value proposition. How do you establish, and we saw this in the video of South African, right? Where he actually differentiated himself It was all about how he drove customer perception. It had nothing to do with, he didn't talk about what cosmetics he will use, what are the features and properties of those cosmetics. He didn't go there. He simply established value by managing customer perception. So you'll have to start thinking very, very differently. You can't think like an engineer. And here is how I really want you to put down your value proposition statement. Rigorously, you may have multiple value propositions, write separately for each and every value proposition. But this is the structure. Please take a screenshot, or you can later on go online. This webinar will be published on YouTube. But this is how you need to define your value proposition. My value proposition is for target customers. So what market segment will you operate in? Who are dissatisfied with current alternative? Who will you compete with? Our product service is a new product. What does your product do? That provides, keep solving. What problem will you solve for the customer? Unlike, how are you different? If you answer these 6 questions, you will have clarity about how will you position your product in your sales process to the customer. How will he see you different? So please make sure that you do this very, very rigorously before you actually start any sales activity. And remember, your final sale value proposition will not emerge on day one. It will evolve as you keep finding different kinds of customers, as you move from technology enthusiasts to visionaries, and you move on to your conservative markets, and then finally to laggards. It will change. There is a beautiful framework called Customers Jobs to be Done. It's available online. You can check that. You can get the reference from our website. Fundamentally, customer doesn't buy products because they're out there. He buys a product because he has a job to do, for which the customer will hire your feature, product, or solution. And what are those jobs? Those could be functional jobs. You get a new job, you need to buy new clothes, which are, your office needs formal dressing, you buy new clothes, functional. What are emotional jobs? You just found a partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, and you're going to go on date. So now you need to look the best for her or him. Now you'll buy clothes which actually meet an emotional need. And then your company decides to put you in front of a customer, and they say, you know what? Or rather, let's say you have to attend a wedding, a friend's wedding. And now you need to buy a suit or a sherwani or whatever, a lehenga, to attend that wedding. Social job. You need to have that clarity that when a customer buys your product, what is the fundamental nature of job he's trying to perform? Why does he need your product? Because that will determine how do you position and how do you sell. Most entrepreneurs don't do this. In fact, the first framework that whosoever signs for Coach Inside, the first framework that he has to fill up is Customer Jobs to Do framework with us. It's a fairly elaborate framework. Don't want to spend time here right now. But anybody who wants to understand it should attend Idea to Opportunity webinar. We go into greater details there. But very quickly, what does this framework do? After you identify the job, you qualify the need. Need can have problem visibility or customer need, which is need can be, customers can be, it can be an aspirational need or it can be a critical need. It can be a latent need, customer feels it, but it's not there in his conscious mind, or it can be blatant, conscious. Traffic is a blatant critical problem, comes here in Bangalore. Garbage is a latent critical problem, comes here because it doesn't stop your daily functioning. If it was lying outside the gate of your apartment block and it doesn't allow you to get out of the apartment block, it will become a blatant critical problem for you. But it is on sidewalks where you don't go. You don't walk on sidewalks. So figuring out what is the underlying nature of need behind the job that the customer is trying to perform becomes very important. So how do you plan to compete becomes the next issue. So will your idea serve a latent critical need? You need to, whatever we should, you need to have figured that out. If it is serving a latent critical need, you got to get thing going. You'll position it accordingly. Is it solving an unworkable or an unavoidable or an urgent problem or an underserved problem? Unworkable problem, garbage lying in front of your gate become unworkable. Unavoidable, it's lying on the pavements. You can't walk on the pavement, but you can get onto the road and walk. Urgent problem, it's lying out beyond, it's lying on the neighboring plot. Yeah, it smells. One day it has to be removed, but you don't bother. Underserved problem, it's lying in some locality which is where you only pass by once in a while. If somebody comes with a great solution, you're not going to invest in it because you're not affected by it. So this is the third part you have to do. Jobs to do, figure out the nature of need, figure out the nature of problem, because that will tell you what is the level of traction your solution will have, and it will also tell you how do you position it to the customer. What is the value that you're creating for the customer? Remember, value part is important. So in that example, the problem that he was solving for her, where does it fall? Unavoidable, unworkable, urgent, underserved. Clearly, it's going to fall in unavoidable, unworkable space. So value in her mind will automatically go up. And therefore, you will convince yourself to pay a higher price. Or if you're just automating a task or making it more efficient, it's going to be a tough business to be in, because then operational efficiency is what will drive that business. Please remember, customers don't buy products because they're out there. Customers buy products to help get jobs done. If you don't need something, you won't say, oh, I'm going to buy that product because you know what, it's out there. You're going to buy it because you want to do something and you're unable to do it. So for example, let us say in your house, there's a constant failure of electricity and you call the electrician and he comes and checks it. But now electrician is gone on a holiday. He's not going to be there for 1 week. What will you do? You can't find another electrician. What will you do? You'll go buy a tester. You'll buy a screwdriver. You'll buy some pliers which you can use. You will buy other stuff which you would not have thought of buying because the job has changed. The nature of problem that you are facing has changed. So that analysis becomes critical for you to decide how will you effectively sell to a customer. Because if you don't understand what is the underlying nature of problem or what is the nature of need, how will you position? Okay, will your idea truly disrupt the market? Then you have a great opportunity. I mean, you initially be cautious. If you're truly disrupting the market, initial sales will be slow till the market catches on. Or are you just making sustainable improvement? So fine, selling becomes a little more difficult because if the competition is there, because competition will start catching up very quickly with you. So you'll have to have sales strategies which actually continuously keep making improvements in your product. So it is not independent. Sales cannot be independent of your product roadmap and how are you fighting competition. Or are you just driving efficiency in the market? In which case you better keep really paring off costs from your operations. Keep making your operations more and more efficient. And that will be your value proposition to the customer. Then what will be your competitive strategy? Are you competing with the incumbents? Are you going to compete with giants? You'll have to then figure out, okay, I'm going to compete with giants, then how will I create value? Answer has to be found. Or are you going to enter the bottom of the market? That is your value. Price is your value. So you're going to say same features, but lower price. Clear strategy. Compete with non-consumption. Go to geographies where the product is not being consumed. Flipkart did that with book selling in India. Meesho did that with e-commerce in tier 2, tier 3 towns. So you can have a competitive strategy that really helps you get off the ground. I have seen very few entrepreneurs spending any time on this. They don't think it through. how should you position? Okay, you thought through all this. Now comes to the trickier part. How should you position your product? Unfortunately, what I've seen is most entrepreneurs start talking about that great technology that they have built, the great app that they have built. They're really talking features. But the challenge with features is that customers very quickly start comparing you, because now they're dealing with something very understandable. And the first response of the customer is to be suspicious of anything that they're being asked to buy. Remember, you can never sell anything to a customer. You have to make him buy. The two are very different. So how does that happen? How do you actually not sell to the customer and make him buy? You can use what we call behavioral economics. You play around with how you actually expose price to the customer so that he's tempted. So he thinks he's getting advantage. So a very good example of this is that Economist magazine in 2005 or 6 wanted to start selling digital versions, 5 or 8, one of those years. Wanted to sell digital versions of their print magazine because profitability in print magazine was going down. So they were selling the main magazine at $100. They announced the digital version at $20. Guess what? The sales just didn't pick up. Why? Because the value of having a printed magazine in their hands and actually reading it in customers' mind was worth it for $100. If the price of that had been $200, maybe they would have been tempted. But at $100, it was worth it. That experience was worth it. So what economists did, they used a pricing strategy that we call the decoy strategy. So they created an ad which actually on the left-hand side had the digital version. They showed Economist picture and they said digital version $20. Then in the center, again, an image of Economist and print version $100. And then on the rightmost side, they had print and digital $100, which is same price as print version. Now the middle one is a decoy. What they did by this is the customer's thinking changed. He said, hey, I'm getting the print version in any case. The digital is free. So it doesn't matter. Let me take print plus digital for $100. They changed customers' behavior by playing with how he perceives price. This is what advertising companies do. This is what marketing companies do. Play with perception. This is what that sales trainer did. Played with perception. How you perceive price. It is completely driven by value the customer sees. Interestingly, in about 3 years' time, 65% of Economist subscribers shifted to digital version because they realized that, you know what, why spend $80 for reading the same content? See, now their thinking changed. Same product, but while they had got used to printed version, their perception was very different. Once they got used to digital version, their perception shifted. But there's more to this. So pricing, how customers perceive it, is one aspect. Then you can also use psychology, which is really playing with emotions. And okay. So thing here is you move from rational to irrational. I have 3 clips here, but I'm short of time. I'm actually going to use just one clip Sudeep, you need to tell me whether you can see the clip.
No.
You better take from different angles. Make it look good. Okay, I'll start with Vada.
Do you want them like that?
No?
Can you see the clip?
No, there's
Okay.
a great thing.
I'm going to stop. I'll give you the links to these clips, but I'll briefly tell you what these clips do. So there is this cream called Moo Cream, which people use for any body ache. When this cream was launched, the campaign was basically they would show a housewife who's running around. In fact, the first ad was she was running around with a jhadu in her hand. And while she's working, she suddenly reaches out and gasps and says, "Ah." And then the next scene is the husband steps in with the Move cream. He said, "Kya hua? Dard? Move laga दूं?" And then both smile at each other and the ad is over. In this ad, nowhere do they tell you what is unique about Move cream. In fact, they don't even tell you what does it include and why is it better or what is the price. But they played with a perception, maybe rightly so, which a lot of women have, housewives have, is that the men of their house don't take care of her. And that is the button that is the perception the Move ad manipulated. So what they did was, hey, when it comes to Move, your husband really cares. And the cream became an overnight success. Nothing to do with price, nothing to do with technology or features behind the product. So the key takeaway here is, guys, don't look at features when you sell. You have to see how is your pricing, what is your pricing strategy, and you also need to see what are the customer's buttons that you need to press. So quickly going back to the presentation, share. Okay, so this is where we branched off, and so guys, it's very important to understand all three aspects when you are selling. Not only your features, they matter because they create the real differentiation, but how will the pricing be perceived? What emotions are involved? What is the nature of job? How do you use all three to effectively position your product in customer's mind becomes critical. And that, guys, is the last slide. So time to take questions.
Do we have any questions? Avinash, Abhijit, Amit. Tell something about the course. Okay. Josh, Madan. Amit, yeah. Do you have any questions related to the session that we had just now? Okay, if we don't have any questions, can we have a quick round of takeaways, key takeaways from the session, possibly?
Yes, Abhijit, you need to think through your whole, technology enthusiast, early adopter.
Typings.
Please.
Come. Unmute everybody. So you'll have an option of unmuting everybody. Can you do that, Ravi sir?
Hang on. I'm actually going to convert you into host, and why don't you do that?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, Abhijit says startup definition and value propositions are eye-openers to him. I hope it's an eye-opener for most of you.
Okay, I request to all of you for unmuting. You can come in and start, we can share our takeaways from the session. Avinash, Abhijit? Jinan. Okay, Amit, AK, yeah, you guys have come online. Can you start sharing, please?
Abhijit.
Yeah, hi, Abhijit.
Yeah, this is a great session. Basically, I have basically this COVID period is a great time for learning for all of us who are in the startup period. But this particular session cleared my many doubts related to how to define the startup from the MSME and what I need to do, what I need to think, because I am in the first year of my startup. So that's why it is a very good learning for me that I can share. Thank
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, hi. This is Josh here. I mean, this was a good session because he's taught us how not to reinvent the wheel. He's got the systems in place. I'm sure he's done this for a lot of other startups with this team with you and all of them. So this is really great. It's being done very systematically. My business also would need these systems to be put in place exactly like how it's been segmented. So I would need a lot more support from you all. I'll be in touch with your team soon. Thank you. Thanks for this.
Sudeep, I can't hear you.
Okay, am I audible now? Okay, so
yeah.
Anybody else wants to share this? Okay, I have shared the link for the YouTube channel where the video recording will be broadcast.
Sudeep, can't hear you. Sudeep seems to have dropped out. Okay, he's back. Sudeep.
Post this session, stage, and we. Hello.
Sudeep, we can't hear you.
Ravi sir, I'm not sure if it's very unclear. Can you help wind up the session, sir? I think we will wind up and we'll send messages to stay in touch.
Okay, we can hear you now. Why don't you continue?
Yeah, sure. So I think, yeah, some of us have already dropped off because of this last minute confusion. We'll send a message to stay in touch, and the YouTube channel I have shared on the chat. We will also share it via messages and emails to you. And if whoever want to more. Contact details will be there and can converse more on. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Let's conclude this session. Thanks a lot, Ravi sir, for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm closing the session now. Yeah. Thank you very much.